2 hours ago, the United States Treasury Department executed the most aggressive financial strike ever directed at a NATO ally. Acting on a presidential emergency order under IEEPA, Washington moved to freeze an estimated $800 billion in Canadian government-held assets inside American financial institutions. Pension funds, Federal Reserve holdings, infrastructure bonds. All of it locked overnight with zero diplomatic warning and zero legal justification that holds under international law. The official reason was retaliatory interference with American economic sovereignty. The real reason is simpler. Mark Carney refused to hand over lithium, cobalt, and nickel at below-market prices. He refused to give American defense contractors preferential access to Canadian supply chains. He said no, and now the White House is trying to squeeze a nation into submission through its bank accounts. Within minutes, the S&P 500 began sliding. Currency traders started moving. In Ottawa, a plan waiting for exactly this moment was already in motion. Before we get into what Carney did next, hit that subscribe button and like this video so you never miss a story like this. Let's understand what this freeze actually means, because this is not a tariff. Tariffs make goods expensive. This is a financial weapon. The executive order has three components. First, all Canadian sovereign wealth holdings in American institutions are frozen indefinitely, approximately $800 billion, pension funds, Federal Reserve holdings, infrastructure investments in American airports and bridges, all untouchable as of this morning. Second, any American company making royalty payments to Canadian government entities must halt immediately. Crown corporations stop receiving revenue overnight. Third, Canadian banks face enhanced regulatory oversight that functionally shuts them down. TD Bank alone serves over 10 million American customers. This does not just hit Canada. It hits American households. Washington's logic was familiar. Every country cut off from American financial systems eventually broke. Cuba, Iran, Venezuela. The White House assumed Canada would follow within 90 days. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. Here is where Washington fundamentally miscalculated. In February 2026, the United States Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that IEEPA, the very law underpinning this asset freeze, does not grant the President authority to impose financial penalties on foreign nations without congressional approval. The emergency powers invoked lack the legal foundation the administration claimed. Trump responded on Truth Social, insisting all freezing decisions remain fully in effect and calling the ruling an attempt to drag America into catastrophe. Legal experts called it something else. A constitutional crisis. And Mark Carney, who ran two of the world's most important central banks, understood exactly what that meant. Washington had fired a weapon it may not legally be allowed to fire. He was about to use that fact. 45 minutes after the freeze became public, Carney appeared at a podium in Ottawa. No notes. No teleprompter. He did not open with outrage. He opened with one sentence. The United States has weaponized its financial system against its closest ally using legal authority its own Supreme Court has ruled it does not possess. Canada's response will be proportional, lawful, and permanent. Then came 6 measures. First, emergency actions at the International Court of Justice, invoking violations under 6 bilateral agreements and the USMCA, a case built over 14 months. Second, the Bank of Canada activating an expanded currency swap with the People's Bank of China, allowing Canadian institutions to clear transactions entirely outside the American dollar system. Third, all Canadian energy exports will now accept payment in euros, yuan, and British pounds. The dollar is no longer mandatory for Canadian energy settlement. Fourth, every Canadian pension fund ordered to divest from American assets within 90 days, estimated withdrawal $600 billion. Treasury yields spiked within minutes. Fifth, all pending American applications for resource extraction on Canadian soil suspended indefinitely. Sixth, the move that silenced Washington, Canada accelerating trade agreements with China, India, and the EU for critical minerals and energy. 3 billion consumers. The agreements were already negotiated. Carney was simply activating them. Here is why those 6 moves detonated inside the White House. The freeze was built on one assumption: Canada was an isolated, dependent target. It was wrong. Those frozen Canadian assets include stakes in American highways, airports, and water systems. Freezing them does not punish Canada, it destabilizes infrastructure Americans use every single day. The currency swap with China threatens the dollar's most critical structural advantage. If Canadian oil begins trading in yuan and euros, other producers watch. And dollar dominance begins, slowly but irreversibly, to erode. The S&P 500 is already down 10% in 16 days. Jet fuel costs up over 100% in 3 weeks. And Canada's 1.7% GDP growth, lowest since 2020, is no longer the vulnerability Washington assumed, because Carney spent that same period building alternative revenue streams that are now fully operational. The American business response was immediate. J.P. Morgan's CEO warned that weaponizing financial systems against allies destroys the dollar dominance that gives America its global power. The Business Roundtable demanded reversal. Republican senators called for emergency briefings after learning Canada's uranium suspension could leave American nuclear reactors short of 30% of their fuel. These are not Canadian voices. These are American institutions telling their president he just aimed an $800 billion weapon at his own economy. Internationally, the EU warned a financial system used against allies today will be turned on others tomorrow. The UK confirmed full solidarity with Canada's legal challenge. Japan, South Korea, and Australia all expressed alarm. Canada is not isolated. America is. Trump has 3 paths and none led where he intended. Enforce the freeze and watch allied nations accelerate de-dollarization while American markets absorb a $600 billion withdrawal shock. Quietly reverse the order, but Carney has stated publicly Canada will not negotiate until the freeze is rescinded and a legal framework preventing future unilateral actions is in place. Or escalate further against a NATO ally while managing tensions in the Pacific and Middle East with his own Supreme Court having ruled his authority in question. Every path leads to the same place, the negotiation Carney wanted from the beginning. Between equals. Under international law. Without coercion. 2 hours ago, Washington believed it was delivering a knockout blow. 2 hours later, the dollar is under pressure, allied nations are building systems to bypass New York, and the former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England is dismantling the financial weapon used against his country with 14 months of preparation behind every move. Trump wanted submission. He got a systematic unraveling of his own leverage. Carney was never reacting. He was waiting. Washington just gave him everything he needed. Do you think Canada can win this financial war? Drop your answer in the comments.